Robert, of course, is an NFL analyst for Fox, but for years he covered and studied college football, and nobody I know has a sharper eye for football than Robert does. He, of course, played college football at Ohio State before making Pro Bowls at running back for the Vikings. But trust me, Robert is about to give you a completely objective opinion of what rival Michigan just achieved. Mr. Smith, good morning to you. And welcome to Undisputed. And how did you see last night's championship game?
Well, you know, Denny Green was my coach with the Minnesota Vikings.
Yep.
And he used to always say when we lost the game, to the victors, go the Mary Franklin spoils, you know, with slightly different language, right?
And
the victors were certainly valiant last night. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, just too dominant. Offensive line, defensive line. I mean, geez, what a performance in that first half. I mean, those long runs. And I think Washington really got exposed. They would have been the lowest ranked total defense to win a national championship in the BCS era. They got really exposed. You can see on these runs right here, they just really didn't have any speed at the second and third level of that defense. And you know what Jim Harbaugh wanted to do? He wanted to go with these heavy sets, go play action, and grind the clock out. And, of course, Washington just wasn't able to convert on the opportunities that they did have. I think it definitely hurt Michael Penix's draft stock in some of the throws that he had last night, some of those opportunities, but there just weren't enough of them. We'll get a little bit more into the details of what Michigan has done defensively, but I think that's the thing that we've seen from Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. Coaches need to be coachable, right? They have to figure out where it is that they're deficient. And after 5 straight losses to Ohio State to open his career, he knew that he needed to make some changes, and he did.
He did.
Bully ball, Robert. You know, that's basically what it boiled down to. It's like you mentioned the offensive, defensive lines, controlling the line of scrimmage, patient running by Edwards and looking at the hole. You played the position. He was not in there, getting in there fast. He was very patient in picking his spots, long home run hitters early in the game. But when you look at these two conferences, the Pac-12 conference and the Big Ten, we got 4 teams that are now going to go over to the Big Ten conference in USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon. Well, you saw exactly last night what could happen to you if your interior lines are not up to snuff. In the Pac-12 conference, as you know, historically, we like to throw the ball all over the lot. We don't like to muddy it up and beat up the line of scrimmage. It's just something that I don't know why that's been the case for so many years now, but until that changes on these 4 teams that's going into the Big Ten Conference, when you play Ohio State and Penn State in Michigan, maybe Wisconsin gets back into the running game at some point in time, this is what you're going to see in that conference. You're going to see a physicality versus a finesse. And I think going into the game, we all knew that this is what Jim Harbaugh is going to do. He's going to play action. He's going to run the football. He's going to run it some more. He's going to play action. He's going to run until something finally hits. We knew what Michael Penix in the Washington Huskies were going to do. They're going to try to throw the football with their receivers, and it just didn't work out. The 2 styles didn't work at all, Skip.
No.
But remember who was in the Pac-12 with strong offensive and defensive line play though until 2015. It was Jim Harbaugh, right? When he was at Stanford. And what he had one of my favorite lines ever when he was at Stanford. He said, "We're going to win with 2 things, character and cruelty." And he brought that same mentality. It just took him time. It took him time to catch up from a talent perspective to Ohio State. I think that was the biggest part of it. But he did all kinds of, he's quirky. All the lines about, if worms had guns, birds wouldn't be afraid of them, which I still don't quite understand. The satellite camps, he did all the foreign trips. He's just kind of done it all. And now, the calculated endorsement of revenue sharing. I mean, he's smart, man. He knows what to do. But I think the biggest thing that he did defensively, he went from that blitzing, attacking style. Remember what he had? He had Don Brown, Dr. Blitz, as they called him all those years, but he went to John Harbaugh and he said, "Hey man, I need some help on the defensive side of the ball." So they brought over Mike McDonald, and then Jesse Minter came in. Mike McDonald, it worked out so well. He's like, "Okay, Mike McDonald, I need him with the Ravens." So he brought Jesse Minter in, and this, Key, in the NFL, kind of what we've seen, that Vic Fangio style, We're going to play softer on the back end. We're going to have at least 2 safeties back there a lot of the time. And Washington just wasn't able to make them pay when they were sitting back there in those high safety looks. But they dialed back some of the pressure. But if you're going to do that, you got to be great up front. And Graham and the boys along that defensive line, although the sack numbers weren't huge, they were applying pressure to Michael Penix, forcing him into quick decisions.
Yeah, they had 18 pressures last night, and they knocked him around. And the one play that started the second half, I think that Michael's ankle got stuck underneath, and it wasn't right. I think his ribs got jarred and probably injured. And yet, quick point about the overall stats of this football game. If I had told you yesterday, going into this game, that Michigan would go 1 of 10 on third down, if I told you yesterday that Washington would run 71 plays to only 57 for Michigan and would win the time of possession, what would you have told me yesterday? You would have said, oh, it's a battle, right? But you wouldn't know that Washington went 2 of 14 on third down. But the point was, the damage that Michigan did running the football mostly came in just the first quarter on just 3 plays, right? If we could see those
150 yards on 3 plays,
149 on these 3. If we could see them all in a row just to see what happened. Donovan Edwards got loose. He hadn't gotten loose really all year. I hadn't even noticed him all year, and that's just a non-wrap up. He bounces it out and escapes for a touchdown. So that one goes for 41, and then here he goes again. That's just gaping hole, obliterated at point of attack, and that's 49 more yards.
And look at that separation on the second and third level of the defense. That's what really stood out to me.
Look at Blake Corum outrun the corner. Yeah.
Oh, it was great to see Corum. I had an opportunity to interview him last year, right before he tore his ACL. Tore his ACL late in the season, missed a couple of games, and came back strong. Man, I was happy to see him do what he was able to do. But that second and third level of the defense, just no speed for Washington, and that's why they had the number of close games that they had this year, because that defense just wasn't really up to stuff, and they were able to cover it up.
Robert, can Blake Corum play pro football? At what level? What's his ceiling in pro football? How good can he be?
I don't know how good he can be, but I think he can definitely play pro football. I don't think he's going to be like a Mike Hart and flame out. One of the things that I saw from him, which I think it's the hardest thing to learn as a running back, and I think, Keyshawn, you had already mentioned it. You talk about that patience, really late cuts, really pushing the line of scrimmage. You could see really setting up his blocks, moving wide, setting back, but making those second and third cuts. He's one of those kind of guys that just has a natural feel at the second and third level of the defense, is kind of where safeties are approaching, where he needs to make those extra cuts to turn those 15-yarders into 30 and 40-yarders.
Yeah.
And 59 last night.
I covered Emmitt Smith, obviously. I see a little bit of Emmitt in Blake, in that they're both obviously short, stout, incredible sort of underrated quickness in tight spaces, and also underrated acceleration, because Blake can hit whatever his top speed is. I don't know what he'll time in the 40. I think he'll be in the 4.4-ish range, somewhere in there. Maybe not Robert Smith fast, but
you're lucky you don't have Michael Irvin on the set. He'd be yelling at you right now for any Emmitt Smith comparison. But
there's some there, because he's hard to find behind the mammoth offensive line. You can't find him until he's into your second level, and all of a sudden it's like, where is he? How can we get him on the ground? And he's hard to get on the ground.
And we saw it, with your Cowboys, picking up Deuce Vaughn. Now, he's obviously a bigger back, doesn't quite have the suddenness that a Deuce Vaughn has, but he has more power. So I think that his game's going to translate to the NFL level. Yeah. Like, what's his ceiling going to be? A lot of times that's what pieces you have around you, what that offensive line looks like, and, how dangerous your pass threat is.
If I can get 4.5 yards of pop out of a guy like that, I'm not asking him to hit a home run every time,
But he can move. He can get loose. I see him get. You saw it on the 59-yarder. Okay, let's take a quick look at early in the second quarter. Michael Penix has a chance to make this a real live football game, because his guy Rome Odunze gets open, and they're kind of on the wrong page, but he is wide open. Keyshawn, what did you see here?
Well, he's not ready to throw.
Yeah.
He's open, but Penix isn't ready to throw. And what happens in these situations, when you uncover so quick, though, Skip, and the quarterback's not quite ready to go, it sends a sure panic on both players' part. I've been in this situation in the NFL as well as in college. I get open and I'm ready for the ball, but the quarterback's not ready to throw, and then he rushes the throw, and it gets you turned around and gets you off a little bit. They came back to that same play later in the game, and they were able to hit it.
They hit it. But Odunze looked like he wanted over the inside shoulder off his break.
Well, as soon as he got open, he put his hands up.
He put his inside hand up.
Can we pull the play back up? Because the thing that I want to watch, and Keyshawn mentioned it, he's not ready to throw. The reason he's not ready to throw is his drop. And we see this so many times. Quarterbacks' inconsistent feet lead to inconsistent throws. And, you watch him throw off of that back foot. And I think that's the key right there. When quarterbacks don't have their feet timed up in the drop and ready to throw and don't get all of their cleats into the ground to make that throw, it leads to that type of inconsistency. So that's something you just can't do at the next level. And you look at young guys and C.J. Stroud. Yeah, I'm going to mention him because he's an Ohio State guy, but he's also going to be the offensive rookie of the year in the NFL. The thing that you see out of him is consistency with that drop. And, we had a chance this past weekend to call the Patriots game, and Bailey Zappe's, even though he hasn't spoken to Tom Brady, he talked about just how detailed Tom Brady always was with those drops and really timed that drop up to the route combinations and to the progression. Okay, you get those first 3 or 4 steps. Read one. Okay, quick hitch, reset the feet, get the next step. You see from Michael Penix, it's just almost like a panic throw, right? He's throwing off of that back foot, and more often than not, that's going to lead to problems.
Yeah, and you're not in the Pac-12 anymore. You're up against these guys, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's true.
Or you're not playing Texas anymore. Okay, so now let's look at the first play of the second half. When they get the ball and they're down 20-13, very first play, Mason Graham, who I love, I just think he's a monster of a force in the middle of that Michigan defensive line, only a true sophomore. He blows this play up and blows up Michael Penix, and the ball goes straight up in the air. He's being doubled, and he still blows it up, and the ball gets picked. And it felt like that was their chance to make a statement, to go down and score. And that Mason Graham, he's 320 pounds, and he looks like he's even more of a force than the kid we drafted in the first round, Mozzie Smith. So, he's still got at least one more year at Michigan. He's going to be a terror next year.
No, Michigan's got some depth.
Yeah, and it's that interior pressure that's just so difficult to deal with, because you can't really do anything with formations. You can't do anything with chips with the back. You get interior pressure. I mean, obviously a guy out there in L.A., Aaron Donald, we've seen him do it for a number of years. We had an opportunity to see Quinnen Williams up close and personal, and you get that interior pressure. There's just nowhere for the quarterback to go, and then you combine that with any type of edge pressure, and it's dangerous. I mean, there's just nothing you can do. And you saw it right there. Graham, so good with his hands, good with his technique. And, that's something that's, again, it's for younger players. Yeah. It's just difficult to learn. It's difficult to learn the details of the technique. But using those hands like that, being able to split double teams, combine that with some extra moves that he's going to have developed and get into his toolkit, man, he's going to be dangerous.
Okay, let's look at this play quickly, because the irony of this play is it's Michigan's one and only first down or third down conversion of the game. Third down conversion. It's 3rd and 8 from the 9 late in the third quarter. And J.J. McCarthy, who did not have a great game, gets loose up the middle, and he's got some speed and some athletic ability to make you miss. And you saw it on full display here. And it just got them out of jail, because it felt like it's still the score still stuck on 20-13. It felt like Washington had them.
But you're at the second and third wave of defense, like Robert mentioned earlier. Those dudes are slow.
Yeah,
there's no acceleration. There's no speed. This is a quarterback, you should be able to close and converge on him just like that. But they were not able to, and he picked up the necessary yardage. And as they converged on him, it looked like a couple of them might have closed their eyes when they went to tackling
and hit each other.
Hey, that's what I was going to say. It's one thing to converge on a guy, man. You got to make the tackle, right? And we know that it's more of a problem in the NFL. I mean, you've got 15 padded practices in the NFL once the season starts now, right? It's not
like that. Like he closed his eyes.
You got to get those guys to the point. Take that extra step and make that tackle. Defensive lineman start to jog as soon as he gets a couple of yards downfield. I mean, that level of effort's not going to get it done.
Okay, so that's 1 out of 10 on third down for Michigan. And we get to the denouement of this game, the final last hurrah for Michael Penix. This is the throw that he made early in the fourth quarter, and he finally connects on one, and a flag flies. If we can see this play. Yeah, it is one big time good. It's a pump and go. He threw it off his back foot, but he got Rome Odunze open. He made a nice catch straight over the shoulder, over the head. And there's a hold on the play. And it's called back, and that was basically the end of Washington on that.
Yeah, they was having all sorts of problems on that right side of the offensive line all night long. Yeah. And so I guess the only thing you can do is grab him at that point, Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get beat like that. You watch, he doesn't take any kind of set. You know, that first step, you got a speed rusher like that. That step's got to be upfield, right? And doesn't converge on him quickly enough, doesn't close the door on the inside. It's just bad feet, right? You can't you can't just use your hands in a situation like that. Once you take that set, you got to use your feet and get back to the inside. And look, man, it's easier said than done. And we talk about, we want to be a line of scrimmage team, and everybody says that's the way to win national championships. Those guys aren't hard, or those guys are hard to find. Like, it's one thing to find a big guy, right? Then you got to find a big guy that's got decent feet. But then you got to have, especially when those guys make that transition and moving forward a little bit, the guys just got to have a little bit of mean on them. You know that, Key, right? Like those offensive linemen, the best offensive linemen, they got those elements. They got the size, they got the speed, they got the feet, but they just got a little bit of mean on them. And you just didn't see that. You better get some of those guys, but there are only so many of them around.
Yeah. So, Keyshawn, did Rome Odunze, Kirk Herbstreit calls him the best receiver in college football, he catch your eye at all? I don't know that he's special.
No, I don't think he's the best. No, the best dude is at Ohio State. That's hands down.
I said that last night. I'm like,
it's not even.
That guy at Ohio State.
He's calling the game, so I understand. Yeah, he's calling the game.
I mean, Rome was incredibly productive.
He's productive and he's good, but the best receiver is at Ohio State. And that's Marvin Harrison Jr.
And you interviewed him.
Yeah, that's the best receiver. Okay. It's not even close.
All right, Robert, back to you. Let's deal with the issue that is prevailing right now. Should there be an asterisk on this championship because Jim Harbaugh did get suspended for a recruiting violation for 3 games to start, and then obviously for the spying operation that he oversaw, he suspended for the 3 games late, starting obviously Penn State. What's your gut feeling on how this championship should be viewed historically?
Yeah, I don't really think that there should be an asterisk on it. I mean, for me, I do have some faith in the investigation, and I think that they did what they needed to do. I mean, you fire the linebacker coach, and, you obviously make that change. He served his suspension, and, I think the details of this are going to be figured out here at some point. But my guess is that the linebacker coach and Connor Stallions, they wanted to keep this isolated. They didn't want this to run up the chain in case they were caught, because they felt that if there was at least some plausible deniability, and I think there's probably actual deniability. I mean, I heard old Joel Klatt talk about this. He said that he asked Jim Harbaugh point blank. He said Jim Harbaugh is one of the only coaches that's never lied to him. And obviously he wants to put on a good face on this one. But I just don't know. I don't know how much of an impact, especially moving forward, even before the Ohio State game, something like this had been revealed. And quite frankly, once offenses get a wind of this, and the offenses are doing this anyway, they're changing their signs. They're doing all kinds of things. And this advanced scouting rule was put into place in 1994. And it was really more for budgetary concerns, that advanced scouting. And the landscape of college football has changed. My guess is that rule is going to change. I don't really think it has an impact on Michigan winning the national championship.
Yeah, I don't think it has an impact either, Robert, as far as their national championship, because if they were cheating, that was a while ago. It wasn't in these last 4 or 5 games, right? It just wasn't. So I look at it from that standpoint, and some people say, well, they were put in this position because they won those games that they cheated in. I don't really care about that, but as far as I get it, I love Joe Klatt too. But Joe, don't fall for the I don't know anything from a head coach who runs the entire athletic department.
Yeah.
Okay? At Michigan. He's the head coach who runs the entire athletic department because football is king in Michigan. So let's not, I don't know anything. I cannot fall for that one.
But here's the thing, though, Key. We know that, especially with digital, in the digital age, everything's out there, right? So I'm guessing that there would have been some evidence uncovered by this point that would have implicated Jim Harbaugh if that evidence existed. And that's why, again, you talk about, who was it, Mr. T? Who was the booster that they said they just identified him as Mr. T or whoever that booster was that financed this operation, Connor Stallions and that linebacker coach. Again, I think that they designed this program intentionally to shield Jim Harbaugh. So that operation, that spy operation they had was designed to keep him out of this. I know, Key, you don't believe it. You believe
Never. Never. As I told Skip and Sherm and Michael Irvin, I will never believe he did not know anything. I've been around too many coaches in my career, and they know everything. Yeah. They know it all, your personal life and everything.
By the way, this is what Jim Harbaugh volunteered last night after the game. If we could quickly see his, it wasn't even a response. He just wanted this on the record last night about how innocent they were. Okay. but they did get caught for 2 things, for second-level recruiting violations, for what that's worth, and for Jim obviously oversaw a sign-stealing operation. Do other schools have? I'm sure they do. Was everybody they're all trying to steal signs. The thing I do like about this is that Jim did pay for his transgression, whatever it might have been. He got suspended twice, 3 games and 3 games. And by the way, they weren't sign-stealing when they went to Penn State and they beat them, and then they beat Ohio State, and then they beat Iowa, and then they beat Alabama, and then they beat Washington. So they did that.
That's why I said skip the last 5 or so games.
Yeah.
They took care of business. They wasn't sign stealing at all. But again, Robert, that ain't gonna get me to say, okay, I don't care, man. I just know better. And that's okay. If that's everybody does it, it's fine. But don't do this to me. Make me believe you have no knowledge at all about anything that's went on in your program.
Thank you.
I'm just saying.
All right, hold that thought, because up next, speaking of the NCAA, which is still investigating Jim Harbaugh, next year he will be coaching where? We'll debate. No mercy, no mercy, no mercy. Thanks for watching, Undisputed fans. Do you want more highlights from the show? Make sure to click that subscribe button for all the exclusive content from Undisputed.